You meet someone and the chemistry is electric, instant. The kind that makes your heart race and your mind go quiet for the first time in months. They're confident, a little mysterious, and when they look at you, it feels like they actually see you. Finally, someone who gets it. Finally, someone who feels right. And then, just when you start to let your guard down, they pull away. Not dramatically. Just enough to make you question everything. A text that goes unanswered. Plans that suddenly become vague. Warmth that turns into distance without explanation. And you, despite knowing better, despite promising yourself you wouldn't do this again, find yourself chasing, analyzing, over-explaining, apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Welcome to the anxious-avoidant trap, and if this pattern feels painfully familiar, you're not alone. You're caught in one of the most common and most destructive relationship dynamics in modern psychology. Here's how it works. There are two people, each carrying their own childhood wounds, each with their own version of broken attachment. One person has anxious attachment. They fear abandonment more than anything else. Their nervous system is wired to believe that love is something you have to chase, earn, and constantly prove yourself worthy of. When things feel distant, they panic. When connection feels uncertain, they protest. They text more. They ask for reassurance. They try to close the gap between themselves and their partner because that gap feels like rejection, like proof that they're not enough. And on the other side, there's the avoidant person. They fear engulfment, intimacy, losing themselves in someone else. Their nervous system learned early that closeness equals danger, that needing someone makes you vulnerable, that the safest way to survive is to stay emotionally distant. When things get too close, they withdraw. When someone wants more from them, they shut down. They need space. They value their independence. They convince themselves, and you, that they're just not wired for intense emotional connection. And here's where it gets brutal. These two people, with opposite fears and opposite strategies, are magnetically drawn to each other. Not despite their differences, but because of them. The anxious person is attracted to the avoidant's independence, their self-sufficiency, their seeming confidence. Finally, someone who doesn't need me to complete them. Finally, someone who seems whole. And the avoidant person is attracted to the anxious person's warmth, their emotional availability, their willingness to pursue connection. Finally, someone who's open. Finally, someone who isn't afraid to show they care. At first, it feels perfect. Their wounds fit together like puzzle pieces, as psychologist John Gottman's research describes. The anxious person feels safe because the avoidant is showing interest. The avoidant feels safe because they haven't hit their threshold for emotional exposure yet. There's chemistry. There's intensity. There's a sense of finally finding someone who understands you. But that honeymoon phase doesn't last. Because eventually, the anxious person starts to want more closeness, more reassurance, more emotional intimacy. And that triggers the avoidant's deepest fear, being suffocated, losing their autonomy, being controlled. So they pull back. Not because they don't care, but because their nervous system is screaming danger. And when the avoidant pulls back, it triggers the anxious person's deepest fear. Abandonment, rejection, not being enough. So they pursue harder. They reach out more. They try to fix whatever went wrong. And the more they pursue, the more the avoidant withdraws. The more the avoidant withdraws, the more the anxious person panics and pursues. This is the push-pull cycle, the protest-withdrawal dance, and it's exhausting for both people. The anxious person feels chronically insecure, constantly scanning for signs that their partner is losing interest. The avoidant person feels chronically suffocated, constantly needing to create distance to feel like themselves again. Neither person is getting their needs met. Both are living in their trauma responses. And yet, they stay. Why? Because this dynamic is addictive. Literally. When you're in an anxious-avoidant relationship, your brain is experiencing intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. In behavioral psychology experiments, rats were rewarded with food every time they pressed a lever. Then researchers made the rewards random. Sometimes pressing the lever gave food, sometimes it didn't. The result? The rats became obsessed with the lever. They pressed it compulsively, neglecting everything else, desperately trying to get that unpredictable reward. This is what happens in anxious-avoidant relationships. The anxious person gets occasional moments of connection, warmth, intimacy from the avoidant, but it's unpredictable. One day their partner is attentive and loving. The next day, they're distant and cold. That unpredictability floods the brain with dopamine, the same neurochemical involved in addiction. The relationship becomes a roller coaster of emotional highs, followed by long periods of tension and unmet needs. And the anxious person, starved for connection, becomes addicted to trying to recreate those brief moments when their partner was present. But here's what you need to understand. This pattern didn't start in this relationship. It started in childhood. Anxious attachment often develops from inconsistent or unpredictable caregiving. Maybe your parent was sometimes attentive and sometimes emotionally unavailable. Maybe you learned that love was something you had to work for, prove yourself worthy of, chase. Your nervous system concluded, connection is uncertain, so I must stay hypervigilant to keep it. Avoidant attachment often develops when a child's caregiver was consistently emotionally unavailable or unresponsive. Maybe your emotions were dismissed. Maybe you learned that showing need or vulnerability led to rejection or neglect. Your nervous system concluded, relying on others isn't safe, so I must handle everything alone. And now, as adults, you're unconsciously recreating those childhood dynamics. The anxious person is trying to finally get the consistent love they never received. The avoidant person is trying to avoid the engulfment or disappointment they learned to expect. You're not choosing the wrong person randomly. You're choosing someone whose wounds activate yours, someone who feels familiar, someone who gives you the opportunity to replay your childhood trauma with a different ending. Except the ending doesn't change. Because you can't heal your childhood wounds through another person. You can't fix your avoidant partner by loving them harder. You can't prove to your anxious partner that you won't abandon them by giving them more space. The dynamic itself is the problem. And until both people recognize it, understand it, and commit to healing their own attachment wounds, the cycle will continue. So what do you do if you recognize yourself in this pattern? First, stop blaming yourself or your partner. Neither of you is the villain here. You're both operating from wounded attachment systems that developed long before you met each other. The anxious person isn't needy, they're scared. The avoidant person isn't cold, they're protecting themselves. Both are doing the best they can with nervous systems that learned to survive in environments where love felt dangerous. Second, recognize that this intensity you're feeling, this sense that this person is the one, that the connection is so powerful you can't walk away. That's not love. That's your trauma recognizing their trauma. That's your attachment system getting activated because this person feels familiar. Real, secure love doesn't feel like a constant emotional roller coaster. It doesn't require you to chase, convince, or perform. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth or analyzing every text message for hidden meaning. Secure love feels calm, stable, safe. And if that sounds boring to you, if stability sounds like something's missing, that's your attachment wound talking. You've been conditioned to believe that love should feel anxious, uncertain, intense. But that's not love. That's addiction to intermittent reinforcement. Third, do the work. And by work, I mean real, deep, uncomfortable work on your own attachment patterns. If you're anxiously attached, that means learning to build security within yourself instead of seeking it from others. It means noticing when you're in protest mode, when you're reaching out from fear instead of genuine connection. It means sitting with the discomfort of not knowing, not controlling, not fixing. If you're avoidantly attached, that means learning to tolerate vulnerability, to stay present when your instinct is to withdraw. It means recognizing that intimacy doesn't actually threaten your autonomy, that needing someone doesn't make you weak. It means practicing small moments of emotional openness instead of immediately shutting down. And if you're in a relationship with someone with the opposite attachment style, couples therapy with an attachment-focused therapist can be life-changing. But only if both people are willing to do the work. Only if both people can see the pattern and commit to changing it. Because here's the truth. You can heal an anxious-avoidant relationship. Research shows it's possible. But it requires both people to move towards secure attachment. It requires the anxious person to stop pursuing and start self-soothing. It requires the avoidant person to stop withdrawing and start showing up. It requires both people to recognize when they're triggered and communicate that instead of acting it out. It's not easy. It takes time, patience, and a lot of conscious effort. But if both people are willing, the relationship can transform from a trap into something genuinely healthy. However, if only one person is doing the work, if only one person is trying to change while the other stays stuck in their pattern, then the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. Because staying in a dynamic where your needs aren't met, where you're constantly anxious or constantly suffocated, that's not love. That's self-abandonment. And you deserve more than that. So if you keep choosing the wrong person, if this pattern keeps repeating, know this. You're not broken. You're not destined to be alone. You're just operating from an attachment system that learned love feels like chaos. And the beautiful thing about attachment, it's not fixed. With awareness, with work, with support, you can rewire it. You can learn that love doesn't have to feel like chasing or running. That connection can be stable. That you can be both close to someone and still be yourself. The anxious-avoidant trap is real. It's painful. And it's keeping you from the love you actually deserve. But you can break free, one conscious choice at a time.